Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a hard look at one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century, the genocidal rule of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia.
So get this, between 1975 and 1979, that's less than 4 years, this regime was responsible for the deaths of somewhere between 1.5 to 2 million people. And let's be clear, this wasn't some natural disaster or even just the casualties of war. No, this was a government systematically orchestrating the death of its very own citizens. We now know it as the Cambodian genocide. Now, to really wrap your head around that number, it represents a staggering quarter of Cambodia's entire population at the time. I mean, just think about that. 1 in every 4 people. So how on earth could a regime murder a quarter of its own people? It's a question that it demands an answer. And to find it, we've got to dig into how this brutal regime even came to be in the first place. So we're going to start not with who they were, but with the almost unimaginable result of their rule, the utter decimation of a nation. Yeah, to really get how this happened, we have to trace the path this group took, how they went from this small circle of dissidents to the absolute rulers of an entire country.
All right, so first things first, what does Khmer Rouge even mean? Well, the name itself is French for Red Khmers, and interestingly enough, they didn't even come up with it. It was actually a label slapped on them by Cambodia's leader at the time, Prince Sihanouk.
You see, the movement's leadership wasn't forged in the rice fields of Cambodia, but in the cafes and universities of Paris. That's right, Paris. We're talking about a group of well-educated, middle-class students, including a guy named Saloth Sar, you probably know him as Pol Pot, who formed this secret Marxist circle. And the schoolwork, their academic papers, arguing for this super radical, self-sufficient, farm-focused society that literally became the blueprint for what they would do to their country.
And this core group, they had a name for themselves inside the party, the Brothers. They were the ones who would go on to control the entire country with absolute power. And at the very top, you had Pol Pot as brother number 1.
Now, a really key factor in their rise to power was the chaos of the Vietnam War just spilling over the border. There was this massive U.S. bombing campaign. I mean, it was meant to hit Vietnamese targets, but it absolutely devastated the Cambodian countryside. And the Khmer Rouge, they expertly used all that destruction and the civilian deaths as a massive recruiting tool against the U.S.-backed government. So after a brutal civil war, their insurgency actually worked. On April 17, 1975, their soldiers marched right into the capital, Phnom Penh. And just like that, they had won. They had total control.
Okay, so now they have total control. And what do? They immediately start putting their radical ideology into practice. They had this plan, you see, to completely rebuild society from what they called Year Zero.
And this quote, it really captures their goal perfectly. The idea was to completely burn down Cambodia's past. We're talking its culture, its economy, its families, everything. So they could start society completely over from scratch. And to do this, they put this radical policy in place called autarky. Basically, the idea was for Cambodia to be totally self-sufficient. I mean, cut off from everything, the global economy, foreign help, even modern medicine, just completely isolated. So they ruthlessly divided the entire society into 2 groups. You had the rural farmers, who they called the base people. They were seen as the pure revolutionary ideal. And then you had everyone else, city dwellers, doctors, teachers, monks, basically anyone with an education. They were labeled new people and branded as enemies of the revolution. For most of them, that was a death sentence. And this wasn't just some abstract idea, you know. They immediately put it into brutal practice. Millions of people were forced out of the cities at gunpoint. Money became useless, literally overnight. The entire country was basically turned into one giant forced labor camp. Old schools like Tuol Sleng and the capital became torture centers. That's the infamous S-21. And the countryside, that became home to the killing fields, where just unbelievable numbers of mass executions took place.
You can even see their obsession with uniformity in what people wore. Individuality was just erased. Everybody was forced to wear the same black outfit and this checkered scarf. It was this really stark visual symbol of the new, classless society they were trying to create through sheer force.
Now, a regime built on this much brutality and paranoia, well, it's just not sustainable, right? Their reign of terror lasted for almost 4 years, but its collapse, that was far from the end of the story. Their downfall came really fast, and it wasn't from an uprising inside the country, but from an invasion. Tensions with their old communist allies in Vietnam boiled over into a full-on war, and by early 1979, the Vietnamese army had captured the capital.
But the fall of the capital didn't actually end the Khmer Rouge. The leaders all escaped to the jungles near the Thai border. And then, in this totally shocking twist of Cold War politics, a coalition that included the Khmer Rouge was recognized by the United Nations as Cambodia's official government for more than a decade. They got support from China, from other countries, all because those countries were against the new Vietnamese-backed government.
So as you can imagine, it took decades for any kind of justice to be served. I mean, it wasn't until 2014, that's 35 years after they were kicked out of power, that 2 of the top leaders were finally convicted of crimes against humanity by a UN-backed court.
So when you look at the whole picture, the Cambodian genocide wasn't just some random act of violence. It was the absolute horrific outcome of a utopian ideology, an idea born in those cafes in Paris and then supercharged by the chaos of war. It's just a chilling reminder of how theories that can sound so noble on paper can turn into an absolute nightmare in reality. And that leaves us with a really essential question. How do we make sure history remembers not just the atrocity itself, but the whole complex, messy chain of events that allowed it to happen in the first place?